Hello, my name is Bird Running Water, and I belong to the Cheyenne and Mescalero Apache Nations. I'm honored to be welcoming you to our reimagined Sundance Film Festival, coming from the indigenous lands of North America. I'd like to pay a special tribute to the Ute Tribal Nation, the Lenni Lenape Nation, and the Tongva people. We thank them all for giving Sundance Institute our homes. I would also like to honor the indigenous lands and people from where you are joining us. Please enjoy the show. Ikahet Ahanaka.
Welcome to our Power of Story conversation, Speculative Fiction is the Place, presented by Netflix. I'm Gina Duncan, the producing director of the Sundance Film Festival, and it's my extreme honor to introduce the incredible women who will be participating in what I know will be a memorable and insightful conversation. The conversation tonight is moderated by Jacqueline Stewart, Chief Artistic and Programming Officer of the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. She'll be joined by Hannah Beachler, who made history becoming the first African American to be nominated and win an Academy Award for Production Design for her work on Black Panther. Jewel Gomez, a novelist, essayist, poet, and playwright. Gomez's work has appeared in numerous anthologies, including Dark Matter, A Century of Speculative Fiction from the African Diaspora, Stories for Chip, and Red Indian Road West. Sophia Nali Allison, a Black, queer, radical dreamer and an award-winning experimental documentary filmmaker and photographer. She was a 2020 United States Artists Fellow in Film. And Wainori Kayu, a filmmaker, speaker, and science fiction writer. Her short film Pumzi premiered at the 2010 Sundance Film Festival. And in 2018, Kayu's film Rafiki premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, receiving international acclaim. She's currently working to adapt Octavia Butler's Wild Seed for Amazon Studios and Once on This Island for Disney. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jacqueline Stewart.
Hi everyone, I'm Jacqueline Stewart, and I'm so delighted to be moderating this very special panel on Power of Story, Speculative Fiction is the Place. And to have with me Hannah Beachler, Jewel Gomez, Sophia Nali Allison, and Wainori Kayu. Great to see all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great to see you and everyone else too.
Yes.
So we're all in different places, and I guess that's kind of where I want to start, because it feels to me like we're in a kind of speculative fiction right now in the way that we're having this conversation across various locations. And as we're going to have this conversation about Afrofuturism, about the ways in which Black artists have been exploring multiple temporalities, creating imagined and alternate narratives about Black histories, about Black futures, I'm really excited to talk with you all in more detail about your artistic practices and how the concept of speculation figures into it. And I'd really love to start with you, Jewel, because as a foremother, maybe the foremother of Afrofuturism, as you've been rightly considered, I was really moved by a piece that you wrote about the pandemic recently that appeared in The Nation, in which you talked about the importance of setting aside time for thinking about the past and the future, and how that gave you a stronger sense of what's compelling about the now. And I wondered if maybe you could say a little bit more about how our current conditions, the lockdown, the pandemic, all the things that we've been witnessing and experiencing with regard to racial violence, inequities. The world seems so disconnected in many ways. How has that been impacting the way that you approach your work and your practice?
It's been very, I feel very fortunate that I had started working, writing vampire stories 30 years ago. because it put me in the mindset of thinking about what the possibilities are. And I feel like all of my work is about what our possibilities are as a nation, as people of color, as women, and how that can be changed. And I've always been guided by something I read about the surrealists who were popular in the 30s, visual artists and writers. And their philosophy was, in order to change the world, you first had to change your dreams. And for me, speculative fiction has been that attempt to dream things to be different. The pandemic, the demonstrations, the coming to light of what has been a persistent uh, violent behavior against people of color is really the moment where I think those of us who want to see social change can put our creative talents to very, very good use. Because people are seeing each other, or some people are seeing each other for the first time. And it's like we've been the aliens here all of this time, and people are starting to see, oh, actually, they're not really aliens, they are us. You know, I feel like we're in a weird Twilight Zone episode, actually. So, I mean, I wrote a story for an anthology that just came out called No Police. And the editor asked us to imagine the future when the idea of police was totally changed. And I feel like that's an important thing for all of us to do because we don't have imagination. If our politicians don't have imagination, nothing will change. So I think it's we have a burden to bear, and I'm excited about that.
Wow, no, that's really powerful. And Wanuri, I would love to come to you to talk a little bit more about this idea that Joelle was mapping out about the fact that we have to have the capacity to imagine alternative futures to deal with the now. And as an artist who has worked in the space of, speculation, where does that kind of, notion come in your work in terms of the necessity of being able to imagine alternative futures?
I think that given the time of fear that we currently live in all sorts of different ways, my escapism has been work. My escapism has been exactly what we're talking about. The ability to imagine new futures based on our current present now. A present now where we're isolated, and it's curious. My first short film that actually played in Sundance in 2010, yeah, was about a world where the outside is dead and everybody lives inside. And everybody's separated from everybody else and can only communicate through technology. So it's curious that we're living in a space where it feels like the world is dead, the world is uninhabitable, that the world has become harsh in many ways. And I'm sure even past this, we will have anxiety about being around other people when we become social beings again. So how do we imagine our utopias in that light? And a utopia doesn't mean that it's free of pain or suffering. It just means it's free of political oppression. So how do we imagine utopias for ourselves that are free of political oppression, that can forward this moment in time where we have had an opportunity to be self-reflective, that we've had an opportunity to be seers in the traditional ways of seers, who can take a glimpse into the future and predict things that are to come, but have also had an opportunity to be kind of personal grievers. Because so many of us are mourning the deaths of people, and as storytellers, we stand in our glory and we're able to say, this person is this person because they came from here, and this person came from this other person. You know what I mean? There's a lineage and there's a personal story to tell that is also as compelling and as important, so that we're not limited to considering our lives as statistics and rather as complete beings. So this incredible pull that we stand in the middle of, this fear that pushes us forward as much as it pushes us backwards in a very, very personal, introspective way, is every sort of fuel we need to create huge, dynamic, inclusive futures that allow us all to breathe, that allow us all the ability to be included and to be felt and to be seen, just like we are now, because we were able to reach out to all different corners of the world in one moment. And we're doing this with an amazing lack of effort and with less carbon emissions than we normally would have, you know? So there's something to be said about our nowness, and how we can project it and how we can secure it and how we can really truly nurture this time of vulnerability and call it forth when we need it. And that's what I've been doing through the work that I've been working through. And I've had the absolutely most beautiful opportunity to be working on an adaptation of Wild Seed, Octavia Butler's Wild Seed, into TV during this time, and being able to work with one of the main characters who is a healer, and another one who moves through people like death, is just the most incredible experience to be doing at this time. And it's powerful legacy work that just reminds me of the time and place that we are, but also the necessity for these stories.
Wonderful. And we certainly want to talk more about Wild Seed, and I want to hear from all of you about the ways that the concept of shape shifting it's kind of an interesting through line, I think, across your work. But I'd love to come to you, Sophia, and hear you talk about some of the ways that the current moment, now it's more than a moment, it's been going on for months now, but has it produced a different sense of urgency for you, or in what ways has it been shaping your understanding of your own artistic practice and your aspirations, your vision?
It's definitely made me be more intentional and more honest with myself about what my future looks like, what my dreams are, to be more in tune with who I am, not only as an artist, but as a person, as a spirit. And I think what was so interesting is realizing I needed to understand my identity outside of art, especially when last year it was such an abrasive shock, and so many artists, I think, felt, well, what do we do now? So I just needed some time to go inward to really understand, why am I here? What is my purpose? What am I moving forward to? A lot of introspective thinking about my past, about healing my past, healing, the past of Black folks, of Black queer folks, and really wanting there to be this conversation in which we identify that time as nonlinear, because it's very easy to get stuck in this present, which is, very uncertain, but using this to really dream towards the future, using this to reimagine the past, using this to have time, understanding that time is circular, and just wanting this to allow me to have a different approach to life. I relocated back to Los Angeles last year at the height of the pandemic. I'm originally from Los Angeles, but I've been living in North Carolina, in the South, just kind of refreshing, clearing my mind, being around nature. And then realizing I wanted to reclaim my agency and be back in an environment that was a connection to home for me, that was a connection to my past, that was a connection to my community. And this has really forced me to be honest about why my work is important, how my work is going to be in conversation with this current landscape, how my work is going to inspire and provide medicine and provide a secret language to Black folks, to Black queer people, to women, for us to have our own healing practices, and really wanting to center on rest and not let myself become so consumed in the work that I'm forgetting the care that I need. And I feel like 2021, even though we are just beginning it, it's the first time I've been able to get back into a practice that feels good for my spirit. Last year was really figuring out what I needed for self to make sure I am surviving during this time, to make sure I am caring for myself and my community. But now I've had this recharge to understand why my work is needed and how to really re-engage with my work, to make sure that it is something that is holistic during this time.
Yeah, just that kind of introspection. And I'm really fascinated by what you had to say about your move and why recognizing that going back home would be something that the moment was right for that in terms of reorienting and recentering. Yeah. Hannah,
Yes,
what about
yes.
you? Like what are some of the ways that this moment, this proliferation of moments that are so odd, have really impacted your approach to your work?
Well, I mean, a lot of what Sophia said, I think for me as well. I mean, I have been, even before the pandemic, sort of in this place of trying to figure out, like, same thing, like, where is my life begin and my work end? And that I didn't know how to kind of see myself. I guess the question came down. I kept myself so busy. When we got to the pandemic and I had to stop by force, I kind of started to ask myself, one, why was I so busy? What was I actually avoiding? A lot of it was exactly that, sitting still, telling the truth on myself. Just very simple things. I've been in, I had a little bit of survivor's grief about my career. And odd as that may sound, I got to a place, I think, in my career, I was so used to the struggle. I was so used to, my work came from my pain of my past. And that in the struggle of it, right? Being a single mom, doing all this and that, and trying to work in the industry and all of that. So when I, kind of got to the pandemic and I had to really think about those types of things and tell the truth on myself, basically about, like, what am I actually doing? Am I doing anything for the world? Is this, like, what is my place here? Like, why is this work important? What is this, like, all those questions. So I dealt a lot with, like, just dealing with the past, dealing with what's happening right now, grieving constantly, roller coaster ride since March, intense rage. And I allowed myself that, one, because I'm in my house by myself. And so there's no one here to sort of see it all. But I allowed myself something I've never done in all my 50 years, and that is to just sit in my emotion without feeling like a responsibility to make someone else feel good, or that it was inappropriate, that I wasn't being aggressive, as I've been told several times, or my attitude. I let all of these things that I've been told in this industry go away for the first time. And it was really cathartic. Through all of this crying out of the human race right now, it's and to be able to say that, okay, well, I've kind of come to this place where I kind of found myself. And it was weird because when the first Panther we did was right during the 2016 election. And I know that affected me. And as soon as that election was over and we knew what it was, all my work became very aggressive. Like, all my sets became very sharp and aggressive and protective. And so now I'm doing, 2 in prep during this point in time, this election, exactly 4 years later. And I'm doing more introspective, thinking. I'm sort of trying to figure out how do you combine your life and your career, and your art becomes who you are. Like, I don't want to separate that. So that's a lot of what I've been dealing with through this, and then just trying to work on several different projects. I'm doing this project with the Met Museum, and it's just about the past. It's about Seneca Village. I've been diving into this world of all that's been taken, right? So talking about Seneca Village in New York, which is a predominantly Black community, that their land, what they paid for, was taken by eminent domain, and then they were evicted and sent on their way. So, you know, a part of this house that I'm building inside of a building is the kitchen of a Seneca Village 19th century home. And then the front part of the house is the living room, which is the future. And from our past grows the future. From the future, we remember the past. They're never apart. And so that's what I've been doing. And I've been taking sort of all of the things that I've just rambled through and putting it into this exhibit in a way that I would never do in film, to sort of celebrate who we are, celebrate this community, the Black community, our struggles, our joys, our celebrations, our achievements, our excellence. The fact that, you know, I feel like we're in a place right now where it could be anything. It could be anything. I think that the future is open. I refuse to give up hope. I will not let anybody force me into that, because I tell young kids all the time that I talk to, the one thing that no one can ever take from you is your light. So live in that light. Find who you are. It doesn't have to happen right away. I'm 50. I'm still figuring it out. I'll always be figuring out. That's my art. That's what I say, what I have to say. That's what I try to say through my sets. As much as possible, that I will no longer let anyone write my future. I don't know, that was a lot of work.
No, it's really powerful.
But
And when you say, you know, I am my art, I mean, I would love to hear everyone reflect on this idea. This is something that I think is really interesting to consider in relation to the characters and the time periods and the spaces that all of you create. And Jewel, I would love to hear you talk about this, because when I think about the Gilda Stories, for example, and the multiple time periods and locations, right? Like the concept of having that kind of ability to move through time and space in such profound ways, it seems as though there is something that is that you're creating with this character that really speaks to the creative practice of what it means to be an artist, actually, because you are moving through these different times and spaces as you create these narratives. So that's how it comes across to me. Maybe you could talk about how you experience that.
I absolutely agree. I feel fortunate to have landed on a vampire character, because I can move through time and space with her. And I realized early on in my writing that for us, the past is more than prologue. You know, the past is a really deep stew that we are cooking in, and we cannot go anywhere without the aroma of that past. I have a funny question that hasn't almost hasn't failed to be asked of me when I've done readings, particularly on college campuses. And I'll do readings from the Gilda Stories, and you know, and I didn't know people were so excited about vampire lore when I started writing the Gilda Stories. But inevitably, somebody asked me if the book is autobiographical. And I always say yes. And they take a step back. Because, in fact, I am using the stories to reflect on the lives of people I have always known or wanted to know or imagined I knew. And I feel that's how we pass along the ideas and the ideals through these kinds of stories. I'm so thrilled to hear that Wanuri is doing Wild Seed, because Octavia Butler, of course, is really the foremother. And when I first read her first book, Kindred, it totally cracked me open. I understood, oh, yes, people of color can create these amazing places and ways of being and these insights. And of course, we think about it when we think about uh, witchcraft or voodoo. We've always connected Black people with that, but this was something a little bit different. So my sense of my writing and all the things I try to create is it is definitely me. I am the art. I am the characters uh, in many, many facets of who I am or who I imagine is possible. And I think that's what makes our work so dynamic as women of color. We are in it in a particular kind of way, that we're leaving parts of ourselves and taking parts of it into ourselves. And that's what's exciting to me, as a writer. Cheryl Dunye is possibly going to do a TV film of the Gilda stories. And she and I have talked a lot about what would that mean for me to let it go enough for her to make it her own. And I said, I'm very excited about that because that means another person is bringing themselves to the story and giving pieces of themselves to the story and taking it into them. So, yes, we are definitely our art.
Yes, yes, yes. And Wanuri, since we talked around Wild Seed, it would be wonderful to hear you speak to your attraction to that work, and even more specifically, like the ways that you're beginning to think about how you would adapt it that are, resonating with your understandings of the importance of this kind of speculative art at our contemporary moment.
Well, I'm co-writing Wild Seed with a writer, Nnedi Okorafor, who's an amazing speculative fiction, fantasy writer as well. So the two of us are co-writing it together. And what that means is that we have these, I live in Nairobi, she lives in Chicago, and we have these two really interesting viewpoints of the world that we bring to the project. And for both of us, of all the books, and I think I've read just about all of them. Wild Seed has always been my favorite. The Wild Seed series has always been my favorite because of the ideas that she has about identity, the ideas that she has about mortality, and how we move through time, whether or not we know that we're moving through time. How our influence can affect generations unseen because of what we've said or some tradition that we've made up on a whim, and how that lives on beyond us, and that kind of immortality and that kind of immortality of feeling is really important. So where the book starts in the first book is pre-colonial Africa. So bringing in pre-colonial Africa in a way that doesn't seem dated, where we understand the jealousies, love, hates in the same way that we have been taught to understand fantasy with white narratives that is old and ancient, but somehow we we have no problem latching onto those story types, and just reimagining us at the center of the magic. And for me, it's not a disconnection with who we are, because in my world, this idea, I don't even call it magical realism anymore. I call it mythical realism, because it's based on real myths and legends that I have grown up with, that I have adopted, that I love, that I live by, and now bringing it and pulling it into the present. So finding those strands in Octavia's work and using the knowledge that I have been collecting over generations, the collective knowledge of grandmothers and mothers and aunts, and everybody who's kind of influenced you to this place, has been a really beautiful, joyous thing, and I continuously celebrate the creation of it.
Wow. Well, we can't wait for that, and to hear about the prospect of you working with Cheryl Dunye. Joelle, is also just a thrilling idea. I'm just so excited to see both those projects come to fruition. Sophia, I would love to ask you about the project that you're working on. that is the WebXR project that's a part of Sundance this year, the Traveling the Interstition with Octavia Butler. Could you just share some of what that work is about? Because I'm sure that there are some important through lines with what Manuri was just describing in relation to Wild Seed.
Absolutely. Traveling the Interstitium is a collective project, a group of us artists being inspired by Octavia Butler's work to reimagine and alternate histories, to reimagine the future, to conjure our dreams. And what's interesting is we were actually going to perform this presentation live in New York last year, but the pandemic shut that down. And so we had to really rethink our approach. But before that happened, we would all travel to New York, come together, discuss Octavia Butler, discuss just the histories that we are wanting to explore, the histories that we're wanting to heal, the futures we're wanting to build. And we each decided to create our own individual piece. So mine was really inspired by my own dreams and by my own just thinking that I have daily since I was a child, and wanting to kind of have these diary entries be this reflection of what it means to be a Black woman. My piece revolves around a woman that is traveling to Pluto, and in doing that, she's going to Pluto to create a new world order for Black women. I was inspired by this because as a young girl, I always wanted to be an astronaut, but at the same time, I'm a documentary filmmaker. And so for me, I'm wanting to reimagine histories that are real, even if others don't think they are. A lot of spiritual and ancestral powers. I believe deeply in the power of flight, and that Black women have always known how to conjure flight. And thinking about folklore that has been passed down through Black communities, especially the Black, Southern landscape, and just understanding that these folklores are rooted in truth. My mom is a storyteller, and so growing up in Los Angeles, she was a storyteller in the Leimert Park area, and I was always surrounded by African folklore. And so just since I was a child, I believed that even though people look at these as, science fiction or folklore is not rooted in truth, I always believed that our oral history was our truth. And even though there wasn't documentation or evidence of this, that didn't mean we couldn't conjure these powers. And so in Pluto, this woman is traveling she's traveling throughout space. And in doing that, she's having all these moments where she's reflecting on her own history, on her own memories, and having to really embrace what does it mean to lose memory, to erase memory, and what ancestral memories do we keep with us, which ones remain. And in doing that, having to release parts of the earthly world that have kept us tied there. And so what do we carry with us, and what do we, let fly away from us? But this was really inspired. Since I was a child, I would have dreams about planets, about seeing planets closer than they should be. And these dreams used to terrify me because in my dreams, I understood this is not what it meant to live in this physical realm, but that my body was traveling through a spiritual realm in which the planets were close enough to touch, in which the planets were close enough to Earth. And it would terrify me because I was like, this isn't my reality. So what does it mean for me to embrace this? And so since I was a child, I've had dreams of going into space, of me being conjured into space. And even at times where I give permission to it, and sometimes in my dreams, I rebuke that permission and I say, I'm not ready. I don't want to be a part of the universe yet. So this piece, Pluto, it's very short, but it's almost like this letter to myself. It's me embracing and having to accept this calling that I don't understand, this calling that has stuck with me since I was a child, and for me to finally accept that. And so throughout my work doing hybrid documentary, I'm really wanting to reimagine just what our powers are as Black women, seeing these as truths, accepting it, embracing it. I have another project I've been working on, Dreaming Gave Us Wings, which is a self-portrait series in which I am using my body as a site of memory and embodying what flight looked like for Black women in the past, in the present, and in the future, because I wanted to create tangible evidence for these stories that we've been told of flying Africans, to finally have a spiritual archive that shows this is what we've done, this is where we're headed, this is how we embody this power. And so I'm in this interesting balance of where does fiction and nonfiction meet? What conversations are they having? How, in the realm of documentary, are we able to conjure what in fiction is seen as a truth and what is in documentary is seen as make believe, and to understand and accept that these two do connect, that these two are in conversation. And just we have to tap into this other dimension. We have to allow our mind and our body and spirit to open up to this new reality, understanding that, you know, we're surpassing time and space, that we have control over that. So traveling the interstitium is all of us artists are interpreting our own understanding of our present reality, of the dreams we're wanting to manifest. And Octavia's Kindred really inspired me because of how, you know, her main character is conjured back into the past constantly, even when she doesn't want to. And what happens when we listen to these ancestral voices? What happens when we allow this ancestral calling to move us throughout time and space? And even inspired by her other works, and just realizing that we have the answers and we just have to embrace that even when we're terrified of it. We have to understand that we've always understood what was to come. We've always understood what the past was, and now it is our turn to reshape that, to rebuild that, and to reclaim our power as Black women moving into this new future.
You know, as you're talking, you're reminding me of something that the Combahee River Collective writes in their, you know, landmark statement in 1977, when they say, you know, when we have become aware of the systems of oppression that we've been experiencing, we're told that we're crazy, or we have feelings of craziness. And that's, you know, in part just not being believed by other people, but not even having the capacity to really assimilate and make sense of what you know, what you feel is wrong that's happening in your life. And it's, I think, so interesting to think about the way that then you're connecting that to the relationship between, you know, documentary and other kinds of you know, filmmaking practices. Like what are the best mechanisms for telling the truth? Is there just one, or do we need to be thinking about like a hybrid of modes to get at these deeper truths? And Hannah, I would love to hear you talk about this in relation to your practice, because it resonates so much with what everyone else has been talking about in terms of the importance of grounding in, you know, material histories. Wondering, I love your concept of mythical realism, that it's not a kind of imaginative work that is completely disconnected from mythologies and stories and histories, but rather that there's a really important relationship. But Hannah, how do you, because I know your work involves so much careful research into historical periods and specific locations. You're creating these worlds that characters inhabit, that audiences need to be able to inhabit and believe. And at the same time, these worlds, you know, you're activating your imagination. That they're not literal recreations, they're hybrids. And how do you think about that relationship between, you know, kind of being true to what someone says is reality, but also leaving open this space for play and imagination?
For critical fabulation, yes.
Yes.
Well, first let me speak to what Sophia was saying, because the exhibit I'm working on is based on The People Could Fly. And so what I find so very telling is that whenever I'm in a room full of Black women, no matter if the room is virtual, that there's this connection through exploration and imagination and flight. And so everything that you were saying pretty much is like, yes, that's my life. That's exactly right. There was, you know, when I say dealing with the past, it's these things. It's this other lived realm that you're like, okay, well, I'm nuts, but maybe I'm not. I knew I could fly. I knew I could fly. I did. I have in my dreams, right? But it was real. I was doing this thing that scared me to death. Occasionally I would let myself go, right? And just experience that, which is part of, I think, how I've lived my life, is being able to let go in certain circumstances without the fear of going nuclear or the fear of being hurt or unprotected. And so when I build my worlds around me, especially I'm, able to do this. I can remember, first of all, I want to tell you this story. I can remember sitting years ago, maybe 20 some odd years ago, on my mother's back porch on her swing. And every night I still do this tradition. I look up, I find Orion in the sky. I find Venus in the sky. I talk to them. And I said to myself one night, I can't wait to create a whole nother world, a whole nother universe. I don't know what that looks like, but I can't wait for that to come. And exactly to what you're saying, we know what's to come. We know what's next as Black women. People call it intuition. It's something so much deeper than that. It's something so much deeper than that. And I am learning through this pandemic to trust that. I always fought that voice, that thing, that ability to fly, to let go, to examine and imagine and explore, because I was believing the lie. And then that lie invaded my creative world. So now as I get older and I'm learning to let go of this gaslight, right, of what we really were, what we are, what we're capable of, what we can reclaim, my ability for seeing past, through, above, below, the present, the future, and the past have opened up into this whole other place. And I am free to see it and create it. And I've noticed as well, when you get to that place, you attract that to you. So now I'm in the room with people with light tentacles that lift me up, right? And are showing me even another spatial plane. I've worked with several artists who, over and over again, who I've always said, like Ryan Coogler, I've said from the day I met him, he comes from the sun. I tell people that all the time. I don't know if anybody knows what I'm talking about, but I'm just like, oh, Ryan, he comes from the sun. He doesn't come from here. He's a whole nother level. So it's very interesting that you say what you say, because I recognize this so often in people's work. I recognize this in the Black community. I recognize this in Black women. And I think that it is getting to the place where you trust all of it. And you give yourself over to it. It's such a scary thing to give yourself over to something where you may or may not be protected, because we aren't protected. So that is scary. And there's a fear there. And that's, look, you want to get into it. Like Sophia, what you were saying is how we feel. I completely believe this, and this goes to the mysticism. How we feel resonates through an electricity throughout this world. How Black women move, how our emotions go. It's an electric rod throughout this world, right? And it resonates with everything that's happening. It's really funny. I remember telling my mom about 2 years ago, I was like, there's a reckoning coming, and there's going to be a judgment, and then there's going to be a light. And, but, all of that is part of, holding on to that is everything to do with how I'm creative, with my process, with how and what I choose to do, what time periods. And, the last film that I worked, well, not the one I'm on now, but the last film was Soderbergh movie in Detroit, 1955. And that's when I started really digging and researching into Black Bottom, Detroit, which is not what it was called, Paradise Valley, Black Bottom up in Detroit. Understanding their urban renewal, understanding these places that got raised, and that kind of broke me into several different pieces. That was right on the cusp of the pandemic, right on the cusp of George Floyd's death and passing, Tony McDade's passing, Breonna Taylor. So all those things happened like lightning quick. And, I'm trying to figure out how to get a museum to tell the story of Black Bottom up. So, I had to come back to New Orleans But so, yeah, I think that this journey that I've been on in film, this thing that's taken me on this roller coaster ride, is honestly, at the end of the day, I feel like it's just this. I'm supposed to be here, and I don't know what's going to happen at the other end of all of this. I'm just putting out there what's in my head now with less fear, because I'm starting to own who I am the older I get, and understand what I want, and know that if I don't ask for it, I'm not going to get it, and walk without fear. I wasn't protected as a child, and I may never be protected, but I've learned how to not have a wall and still feel protected within my own heart. Like because it's bigger, right? It's bigger than me. So I'm supposed to be wherever I'm supposed to be at any given moment. And I love it. I love being here with y'all ladies because I feel like this was supposed to be. I'm glad that Jacqueline, that you contacted me, and that I got to hear Sophia speak, and Wanuri and Jewel. Because now it's like, honestly, I'm R&Ding right now, and all these things are going off in my mind. This is my process, right? Like all of a sudden I'm seeing like all these places, I'm seeing all these things. I'm like, a little bit like, gotta go, because I want to write it all down. And it's like, you just sparked all these things inside of me. That's it. That's all. That's all there is. People always be like, I want to tell this story about this thing and this thing. I'll say, well, tell me about your life. Because I love listening to people tell their story. And they'll tell me about their life. And I'm like, well, why don't you want to make a story about that? Why don't you want to tell your story? I can only understand you if you tell me your story. I don't need you to tell me somebody else's story. I want to hear about you, because that's what's interesting to me. I love to people watch. I find creativity through that. I love to hear how people talk, how they walk, how they dress, why they look the way they look. I love to pick up on people's feelings. I love for it to make me sad or to make me laugh. I love to touch things. I don't stop touching things. Wherever I go, all this is part of who I am and why I am what I create, because I just have to live it. That's what I'm learning in this pandemic. It's really crazy. Like, I'm going through this whole thing of like, I've just got to be this thing that maybe it's not human. I'm not sure what that looks like, but it's some type of mysticism. It's some type of something I'm hearkening back to. It's like the ancestors are like in the back of my head saying, like, you know what this is. You know how to do this. You know how to walk. You know how to carry your stick. You know how to survive in this world. So, and you know how to be creative, and that creativity, because you're pouring these feelings into it, like water for chocolate when she makes the cake and she eats it and everybody cries when they eat it. That's what I hope to do. Because like Wanuri, like you were saying, I seek to leave legacy. I don't want the next group of people to forget. Right?
Yeah.
I don't want anybody to forget all that we have given. So that's really important to me, beyond everything else in the world of film, to never forget, because we forget, and then we have this happen. So I don't want that, because I have a kid, right? And he's older, he's kind of talks back a lot, but and I want to leave something. I look at children on the street and I want them to understand who they are, to be proud of who they are, and why that's important in all the work that we're doing. Because I look back at my past, my relatives, my ancestors, and I think, how many people had to survive for me to be here?
Yeah.
We need to pause and think about that more often than we do. And Hannah, when you were talking before, I guess one last question I'd love to spin around is related to when you were listing all of the things that you pay attention to, the voices that you listen to, that feed into your practice. I mean, I thought I was going to ask you all, who are some of the artists, past, contemporary, that you find to be not just inspirational, but are speaking to the kinds of concerns that you have. But I think I would want to open it up in light of what Hannah was saying. Like, it may not just be artists, artworks, but the many kinds of things that you're paying attention to especially now that we're in this kind of almost like sensory deprivation moment. Joelle, you talked about this in your piece when you reflected on what the pandemic has meant for you, that all the white noise of urban life, when that dissipates, then you're really recognizing the things that you have been kind of, holding in and struggling with for a long time. Those things kind of come to light. But what are the kinds of things you're looking at, listening to, that are motivating your creative practices right now, or just giving you a sense of, what's important, what we need going forward? Joelle, could you talk about some of the things that you've been, kind of interacting with that have been important for you?
Oh, wow. Well, I will tell you, it's a little strange because Zoom has taken over everything. And I have begun to feel like, my on my mother's side was Wampanoag Indian, and that old belief that Indians had that if you had your picture taken, it would suck your soul out. I start to feel like when I go on Zoom, am I going to disappear into this machine? So not today. I don't feel that today though. I did a lot of in the beginning. I did a lot of listening to radio shows, podcasts, because I found it engaged my thinking in different ways because I wasn't watching something constantly. And that was real. I'm still enjoying it. Listening to different stories that are broadcast, BBC, public radio, because I find I want my mind to be free to wrap itself around stories. So that's one of the things I've done. In fact, I helped write a 10-episode podcast. So that has been really different for me, and I think helped me engage. I've also been doing more reading of historic stuff. I think when Hannah talks about how she excavates places that have been lost, it's very exciting to me to read more about the histories of places that I've never been or people that I've maybe never heard of. Like the first black woman pilot, Bessie Coleman, or all these different things that I didn't necessarily have time. You know their names, they have a postage stamp, but who are these people? So that has been wonderful for me. But I've also been able to look at a lot of films that I wouldn't necessarily have been able to look at. I got to see the Burt Williams film. It's a lime kiln club, something. But it was only right. It was the only, I think, of 2 films Burt Williams ever appeared in, and I thought, this is amazing. I am looking at this chunk of our history and seeing his genius as a performer, and it really made me feel good. It made me feel richer. And I think looking back at a lot of stuff that I wouldn't ordinarily be watching has been great for me, both as a person and as an artist.
Thank you. What about you, Sophia? What kinds of things have you been listening to, watching?
I've been spending a lot of time with Henry Hampton's Eyes on the Prize lately, wanting just to connect and remember that history. Zora Neale Hurston is someone that always deeply inspires me, just her love for documentation, her love for all types of Blackness and embracing all of that. I return often to Alice Walker's In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. And what makes me return to that is, there are a lot of artists and things I'm watching and listening to right now, but I've been thinking a lot about my mom and my mom's history, and just how myself as an artist, I'm continuing a path that she wasn't able to fully continue for herself. As I mentioned, she was a storyteller in Los Angeles, but when I was a young girl, she had breast cancer. And then after that, my dad died. So she had to become the sole independent parent from me and my brother, and, had to really kind of take a pause on her art to take care of us. And her tenacity and her love for putting us first is something that really deeply impacts me, because I want to see her continue her art, and I want to see her continue the life that she deserves, and that the life that she was moving into. So for me, I'm thinking about just what histories am I healing? What women in my family am I healing, that lineage, and how am I continuing this journey for us? How will me moving farther than they were able to, how does that trickle back so that they can continue in this? So I think that's the thing that's been really resonating with me, and something that I've been deeply meditating on, just the sacrifices that my mom had to make, and how I'm hoping that through my journey, I'm able to heal that. And, she's able to continue to return to her artistic practice and move forward in that. So just thinking about the Black woman before me who weren't able to fulfill their goals as artists, who weren't able to, exercise their brilliance and their talents, me wanting to, be in conversation with them, and hopefully they're able to live through my work. I'm able to, conjure their spirits to be a part of this with me. I think that's what's really important to me right now, making sure the Black women that were erased or were forgotten or were ignored are finally seen, that we continue to excavate their stories, we continue to honor them, and we continue to place them on the pedestal that they've always deserved to be on. And in doing so, we're creating room and space for young Black women after us to take their place in society.
And that's such a powerful way to think about archival practices more broadly, that we're creating these bridges. Obviously, we have walked across bridges, but the bridge also means that we can go back and bring folks from the past, along with us, that creating that sense of a continuum. This is such a powerful way to think about that kind of intergenerational wisdom and responsibility. So important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wanuri, what about you? I've seen you some of your talks in which you really summon a broad range of artists that you are inspired by, and cultural histories that your work is in dialogue with. And I wonder, what kinds of things have you been gravitating to recently?
It's the same thing. One of the things that I try and do as often as possible is curate joy and historical joy through Africa. So curate experiences of joy that haven't been linked to marriage or circumcision or any celebratory thing that we're supposed to be linked to, but rather just pure moments of joy, because we are imaginative spirits and we're imaginative beings, right? And digging into that past with purpose, and thinking about why it was hidden, and why it remains hidden. And that means that as a result, I really have to challenge my own biases, my own colonization, which is hard to even think about, the effects of patriarchy on me, and how I manifest it in my language and in my day-to-day being, and just doing that digging has been so glorious, because it uncovers things that I'm just like, why did I not know that? Why has it taken me so long to know something that is so basic about places that exist in the countries that I live in? So, the thing that blew my mind the most recently was the discovery of the Borana calendar. And the Borana people are on the northeast of Kenya, where Wakanda would be, actually. truly. And what the Borana people did is that they created a calendar, and they would look at because they're on the equator, they would look at where the moon rises and the constellation alongside the moon. And they created 12 months with every moonrise. There was a different constellation for 12 different months of the year. And every single day of the month had a different name. And they were rocks, or they are rocks in Turkana, where the shadow of the moon falls and a person can tell you what day of the month that it is. And that calendar was 12 months long. It was about 300 days in the year, and it predated the current calendar we use by about approximately 120 years. So to imagine that we sat in that wealth of knowledge and we've done nothing with it, and we continue to pass it by as if it was a primitive form of knowledge, is just it boggles me. It truly it's painful. It's painful to think that we're only just rediscovering ourselves now. But there's also a joy in that, because we have the possibility to do it and amplify it, in these beautiful ways. So I've been digging into joy. That's what to say. I've been digging.
I can't think of any better kind of thing to dig into than joy.
That's right.
And joy is the word that comes to me now. Just the joy of speaking with all of you and listening to you, and the ways that you think about this kind of boundlessness of the imagination, but it's not disconnected. It all comes from these roots that we need to tend and pay more close attention to. Just spectacular. I'm so honored to be with all of you on screen and in spirit. Hannah, Jewel, Sophia, Wanuri, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today.
Thank you. Thank you,
you.
all of
Such
you.
an
What
honor.
a
Thank
pleasure
you.
talking to all of this. Has been fantastic.